Good afternoon. I want to thank all of you for coming. It was not the easiest weekend to do this, and we really appreciate your making the time. My name is Pat Clifford, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Acton Area Executive Committee. Welcome to our workshop. First of all, I want to thank the town manager and the municipal properties staff in Acton for arranging this space for us on a weekend, and most especially the League of Women Voters of Acton Area Committee who developed this program. You know who you are if you want to just wave. Phenomenal job. Thank you, ladies. The idea for today's workshop arose out of concern that the lack of a vibrant local news reporting source negatively affects our communities. We heard this concern from our members in the League, and then also from our friends and our neighbors. And at the state level, the League has sponsored 2 forums that focused on this topic on a statewide basis. Today, after identifying it as a local concern, we're going to hear from experts who are our neighbors and help us figure this out. When we offered to convene the meeting to discuss this situation, those of you in the room and more responded. Our mission today is to create the platform for education. It will be up to all of you to decide what we're going to do to move forward. So thank you for coming. I'd like to turn it over to Joanne, who is going to be our moderator, and why did I say you were our moderator?
Thank you. So, once again, welcome. Thank you for coming. Just a few housekeeping things. There's a restroom right straight at the back here, and there are also 2 additional restrooms 1 floor below. And the lights will turn on by motion activation if you get there in the dark. So we're not going to have any particular breaks, so if you need to go to the restroom, just go ahead. There's a thing of water in the back, and it's one of those tricky spigot jobs, so just be warned. There are also copies of all 3 of the publications, though I don't think there's enough to go around. So if you do, browse through one, share, so that everybody can have a chance to see them all. So the first part of the program, we feature the 3 speakers from the 3 publications. Each of them will speak for 15 minutes, and sadly, there will be no chance for questions. I assume that each of them, you can contact them through their websites, or perhaps you'll give your email or whatever in case you have questions. But we do want to move on to the second part of the program. But we'll hear from each of them, and then when that part's done, we're going to be in 6 circles. So we'll ask for the chairs to get rearranged, but don't worry about that part yet. But we'll do that and have the breakout sessions, and then you'll stay where you are, and the facilitator and recorders will move around. So we'll all be clear if it isn't already. And we'll be sure to be done by 4 o'clock. So we'll be out, but it's nice and cozy here, so. And thank you to Mark Ducey of ActonTV, who's recording this portion, so that it will be available on the ActonTV's YouTube channel if you were interested or want to see it again or let people know. But the second part will not be recorded, just the first part. So, that part. All right, so our first speaker today, they all 3 come from the 3 different independent news organizations in nearby towns using different models, so we're going to hear from each. So first we'll hear from Penny, and I forgot to ask the correct pronunciation? Zezima. Penny Zezima, weekly columnist for the Carlisle Mosquito, which has been publishing since 1972 and delivers weekly newspapers to 2,000 residences in Carlisle and sells additional copies at the store. Content is also available on their website. Penny's 39 years with the Mosquito. She has served in a number of roles for the board and the news organization. So, Penny.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out on this frigid day, although it's nice and warm in here. Hi, my name is Penny Zezima. I live in Carlisle. I've lived in Carlisle for 39 years. You may notice a correlation there between that and how long I've worked for the mosquito. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, only in the way that it reflects how we started the newspaper and how a lot of people in Carlisle have started on the newspaper. And I have to tell you, one of the great things about our paper, and probably will be about the Bridge, is that you get people who come to work for you and suddenly they adopt you. And they stay with you over the years, and they changed their jobs and everything, but they're always attached to the mosquito in one way or the other. And I'm the perfect example of that. Yeah, 39 years ago, I was just about to move into Carlisle. I had left Boston College, where I taught English there, and had 2 young kids. And I got a phone call a week or 2 before I was starting to move from a woman named Nancy Garden. Nancy Garden was a member of the board of the Carlisle Mosquito and also a very well-known YA author. She was also my teacher in a writing class that I was taking, so she knew me. So she got me on the phone and she said, well, you know, these 2 papers have merged and now they need an editor, and we were wondering if you would like to be editor of the Mosquito, because we know you can write. And I'm thinking, I don't know anything about the town. I barely know where my new house is. But I don't know why. I said yes, yeah, what the heck. So I started reporting first before I even moved out of Concord. And from there I began as an editor once I had moved. And in those days, well, let me backtrack a little bit and tell you that our Mosquito began as 2 different newspapers. And they both began the same way, which was there was a gaping hole in news coverage locally. And things were happening not just in town, but also at the State House that affected us. And we had no way of letting people know about that. So 2 different groups in town, both affiliated in that they were members of the League of Women Voters, decided to start their own newspapers. And they did that for a while, and then they realized it probably would work better if we only had 1 newspaper in Carlisle. But at one point, little Carlisle had 2 newspapers. So they merged. And the first model that we had was we had 3 editors, 3 news editors, 1 a week, and we would rotate. Well, that kind of worked well for my, young mother schedule, and it worked out very well. And it was like a polar plunge as far as Carlisle was concerned, because I learned stuff immediately, and I got to know my town, and I got to know my coworkers, and that was probably the biggest blessing of all, because somehow the Mosquito has managed over the years to attract the most, the warmest, the most, what do I want to say, Bets? Just the best people, the most concerned people. Excuse me? I'm sorry, I didn't. Sincere? Yes, definitely sincere. And dedicated, there's another word. And dedicated people that have become, of course, my best friends, but also have taught me how to look at the world, which is things are going on and people need to know, and you need to tell them about it fairly. So, anyway, so over the years, I've been a news editor, I've been a feature editor. No, I haven't been a feature editor. I've been a press release editor and letters to the editor. I have done everything except sell ads. I have my limits, and I just won't cross that line. So I have not done that, but I have had experience with everything else. And so I was looking back at how we started our paper. And because we were a small town, and didn't have quite the millionaire status that we have now. I just realized we are 4th in Massachusetts in millionaires. Well, they're going to get a call from our donation group. We really started small. I mean, we started very small. We started on I want to say a linotype, but that's not what it's called. A mimeograph machine in the bottom of a church. And even though I would not recommend it necessarily for people in Acton, the one thing it allowed us to do was to learn who our audience was and what they wanted to know and what they needed to know. And so we got feedback from the mimeographed work that we did. And so then we added a few more pages, and then we got more feedback. And then a couple of people came by and said, could you use some help? I know some really interesting people in town. I could write an article about them. It could be a feature. Okay, why don't you come in? And of course, that person has now worked for us for 27 years. It was something that started slow, but started, and I guess you would say cautiously, but started by learning its audience and what the town needed, and as opposed to what we needed to do. And it's worked very well for us. We have a very different type of business. Most of us are very voluntary, let's put it that way. We've all been volunteering. We do occasionally, some of us get stipends, which would maybe pay the dog sitter while you're at work. I mean, it's nothing, you're not going to Bermuda on these stipends. But it does help out a little bit and make us feel a little bit more professional. And I actually think we are very professional. So what we end up doing is having constant input from the community, not only as to what they want to see. Do you know somebody interesting in town? Is there a board that you need to have covered? I'm looking over, our news editor is right here, Betsy Fell, so, am I doing okay? It's okay, right? She should be the one talking. But also, we are supported financially by the town. We have two ways of supporting our paper. One is the ads that we have in the paper. And let me tell you, one of the best ways to get people to advertise in your paper is to tell them this paper goes only to Carlisle and to everyone in Carlisle, and it's free. So any advertiser that wants to, advertise to these suddenly number 4 millionaire town will get in touch with the Mosquito and advertise for us. And it also helps that then we're not then crossing paths in a bad way with the bridge, because the bridge can say the exact same thing. They're going to everyone in Concord. It's a wonderful thing for your ad people to be able to say. The other thing is donation. And we run a donation drive every November that has been highly, I think, successful. This year, I don't even know what we're making this year, but in the past, we've made approximately $75,000 from the town itself. And lately, we've realized that's from a quarter of the town, who are our longtime donors. And that's a lot of money from just a quarter of the town. We're now working to see if we can get the rest of the town on board. But because of that, it helps us realize that the town sees us as their community enhancement, I guess. Another thing that's important is the word community. We began with an editor who constantly reminded us that we're doing this for the community. We're doing this to enhance the community, and we need to remain part of the community as reporters and as people who put out the paper. And so that's always been our our banner that we don't put on the top of the paper, that we are your community newspaper. And it's worked really well. So, but I'm not saying that is so. Actually, I wanted to start this by saying I am the dinosaur in the room, because I have been around for such a long time that, I go back to the days when you could start a newspaper on a mimeograph machine. You can't do that anymore. But you can, I believe, do it enhancing the spirit of community, and that is, I think, a major point of success. By asking your community what they need, what they want to see, asking them to going to say donate to the paper, but I don't mean monetary, although that would be lovely, but by sending in photos or suggestions for articles, or here, look on our friends and neighbors page. Is there something that you would like to announce in town? I mean, we try to cover it in various ways, but always emphasizing the role of community. And I think that's the whole reason that we're here today, is to find a way to enhance that in Acton, which I think is a very valid thing. I don't know if there's anything else that I need to tell you. I'm sorry you can't ask questions, because that would be wonderful and it would help me a whole lot. But I don't want to bore you with my life. So, which has been wonderful, let me tell you, but has nothing to do with this. So I think I will now yield my time unless there's something else I should. Oh, maybe I should tell you this, as far as fundraising is concerned. We have this year, our 50th anniversary year, we've been around for 50 years, we have started a capital campaign, which has hit bumps, and we're new at it, and you're doing well. But one of the decisions was to get super honest with the community. And so we published our last paper. This was our front page. And it's a letter from a member of our board of directors to the town saying exactly, hey, this is the money we have, this is what we do with it, but it's not going to help. If we continue this way, we'll be out of business in 5 years. You have got to be, and it's a whole long thing. And to be honest with you, we've gotten a lot of donations since this came out on Friday. So we're also in the same, even though we've been around for 50 years, we're also at the crossroads of trying to find a new way to raise money and support our endeavors, which we feel are worth supporting. So in that way, boy, have me back in 5 years and I'll tell you how it went. But this is as far as, does that seem to cover everything, Bets? Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that does remind me of anybody in the room, and I don't know who, remembers Doris Hilberg, but she would say, if there's something you want to see in the paper, by God, it needs to be. I can't do her, her voice, but yeah. And I know a lot of people do miss her touch with our local journalism. So, our next speaker is Terry Morrow, the Executive Director for the Bedford Citizen. It is a digital-only news organization which began in 2012. They currently have about 2,500 newsletter subscribers, and their website has 29,000 unique views per month. They have grown steadily through grants, donations, advertisers, and the publication of an annual guide to Bedford, which is supported by local advertisers, which there are two. The pandemic version and the next version are on the back table there, so you can have a look at that. And so, welcome, Terry Morrow.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here today and talk to you about the Bedford Citizen. I'm the executive director. I'm a volunteer, so I have a regular job. And with me is Elizabeth Hakala, who's our brand new board president, former operations manager, and has been involved with the Citizen longer than I have. The Citizen was founded in 2012 by 3 women. I believe there was a significant League of Women Voters influence on those 3 women. Sure. And from the beginning, they wanted a digital meeting space, a place where the community could get together, get engaged with what's happening in our town. And I will say our local paper was a pretty sad excuse for a paper, because they didn't really report what was happening in board and committee meetings. Every once in a while, you'd hear what was happening in town meetings. And as the years progressed, there was less and less local coverage, so we became more and more important to the community. Today, our mission is to inform and engage the Bedford community through reporting news of local significance, promoting local events, fostering connectivity, and encouraging participation. One of the things we really want is people to be engaged within the town of Bedford, whether it is on a board or a committee, whether it's school sports, whatever it is, be a member of the community, get engaged. We have three ranges of people involved in the Citizen. We have staff, we have a full-time managing editor, and 3 part-time 20 to 25 hour a week positions. That's a community reporter, a content manager, and our operations manager. Our board is very active. In fact, the board was the Bedford Citizen for a very, very long time. All board members are involved in editorial or operations at varying degrees of involvement, depending on what time they have available. Some will be involved in short-term, quick events. Others are involved all throughout the year. Our executive committee recently evolved from meeting every other week for 2+ hours to meeting once a month for maybe an hour and a half. That's because we've expanded our staffing and our non-board member participation. Board members write articles, they produce content. If you've been on our website, we have a weekly poll that's managed by one of our board members. We have a podcast pretty much every week, very brief, Ask Aunt Laura, which is extremely popular. Notice that neither one of those are really news related, because it turns out the people of Bedford, yeah, they'll read some of the local news, but they really want some other life-enriching things. They want to know about their neighbors. They want to know what's happening. How's the football team doing? What about the basketball team? And then we've mentioned the Bedford Guide. There are samples up in the back, which is a fairly new invention, but it's been very successful for us, and that's the only printed publication we put out. We put that out once a year. Board members review and approve all letters to the editor. They attend editorial committee meetings. We don't have a standard editorial structure. There's no editor-in-chief. We have a managing editor supported by volunteers, our community reporter, as well as board members who kind of talk through what's coming up that we need to cover, who's going to cover it, how are we going to cover it. Our managing editor reports to our board president, as do I, as executive director. Really, there are no slackers on our board. 2 key volunteers. One is a former board member emeritus, who's our copy editor, and nearly everything goes through her before it gets published, and then myself. Both of us do about 20 hours a weekish of our volunteer work. Our copy editor wrote thank you notes through our fall fundraising season, along with 2 other board members, so super deeply engaged in the work. For the first 2 years, we were 100% volunteer. The board members, the founders, they attended the meetings, they did the reporting. They figured out how to get a website up and running. They found someone to help be a consultant. They didn't have any money. They used it, it was from their own pockets. So you can found a news organization, particularly a digital one, without a lot of money. After a couple of years, we decided our managing editor, who was a founder, was working awful hard and needed to be paid. Well, we didn't have much money, so we started with a $100 a week stipend. We started in July, and every year the managing editor got another $100 a week. And if we were flush with money in our budget, sometimes that would happen in January too. Our goal was to be able to hire a market rate managing editor when the founding managing editor decided it was time to retire. That happened in 2022, and we were able to hire a new managing editor at market rate. We had 2 excellent candidates from the area and are delighted with our choice. In 2019, we hired our first operations manager, Elizabeth, who also has another job, for about 10 hours a week, just to help us transition from a spreadsheet database with all our donations to a donor database. Huge amount of work, hugely helpful. We needed monthly reports. We needed someone to kind of handle day-to-day things instead of asking the board of directors, the executive committee, to handle it. In 2020, we hired our first, shall I say, real reporter. someone who actually had a journalism background, had been reporting in the area for decades, and was a former Board of Selectmen board member. We did make sure that he had no responsibility to report on the Board of Selectmen for the first year, something that was important to kind of keep that distance between those positions. In 2022, we hired a content manager. We realized our managing editor probably had way too much on their plate, and divided the job into managing editor as well as content manager, who does posting to the website, basically manages the website day to day, and handles social media. And in 2023, the executive director will be getting a stipend of $100 a week at some point when we actually make that decision. That is funded by a grant, so we're really pleased with that, as am I. But we need to work towards someone who is not a volunteer and someone who is not doing it with the spare time they have in any given week. As I joined the board of directors in 2015, which was my first introduction to the Citizen other than being a reader and subscriber, the organization had been fundraising about a year, had a $35,000 a year budget. Fast forward to 2022, our budget was $164,000. Through careful management, we've been able to expand our revenue sources to fund the hiring we've done to date, keep ourselves going. We've pursued small grants. We've conducted a fair amount of small dollar donor fundraising. We've added website sponsorships, and in 2019, we added the Bedford Guide with the goal of selling enough ads to cover the cost of printing it, at which we were very successful. Let's see. Grants, our primary source of grants has been from Newsmatch. One of the benefits of being a nonprofit organization is you get a chance to kind of ask people for money and find where there's money out there. So the Institute for Nonprofit News, INN.org, since we joined in 2019, we've participated in their Newsmatch campaign, runs November 1st to December 31st, and have raised from our community a significant amount of money each year end, November 1 on, as well as received matching grants between, let's say, $15,000 and $23,000 each year to kind of add on to that. We've talked a little bit about the Bedford Guide, but I want to give you a little bit more. It's only our only printed piece, 4 color. It's beautiful. It is a high quality, highly valued guide. Both advertisers and residents value it very highly and always ask, can I take another one when we're at a town event and we're handing them out? The guide was the brainchild of a passionate salesperson who's on our board. He thinks through what the theme is each year, sells the ads, coordinates the design, printing, and mailing of the guide. Could we be any more fortunate? I don't think so. In addition, he sells our website sponsorships, banner ads for our newsletter, and he comes up with that poll I mentioned, the weekly poll, and writes the scallion, which is our take on the onion. Pulled out when we need it. Yep, it's great. Revenue today, this year, 2022, revenue from the guide was roughly 3 times what it costs us to produce and mail it. So, great source of revenue for us, helps us meet our mission, and as I mentioned, appreciated by all. One of the things that I was asked to talk about was, attracting online subscribers, and I've got a few simple ways to do that. Should you decide to go, or some group decide to go with an online digital publication, put a prominent ask for subscribers on your website. The Citizen is free. We say that every time when you ask you to subscribe, we tell you that it's free, so people know we're not going to be billing them $69.95 every year. Use word of mouth and social media from your founders. Every single person should be talking to their friends about the publication, and everyone should be posting on social media, stories, sharing them, doing whatever you can to kind of get the word out. Have a table at community events, sometimes just putting your banner up and sitting there and answering questions for people who come by. And then offer the link to your subscription page at the bottom of every story, because not everyone's going to go through your website to get the stories that you're publishing. And if you get bored with offering subscriptions, alternate that with donations every once in a while because it never hurts to ask for money. Finally, I was asked to provide some advice to the community. My first piece is just do it. If you are really passionate about this, do it. There's lots of support for startups out there. Most models that people have come up with have worked. For the citizen, our founders just jumped in with both feet. There's only one model I've seen that hasn't worked, and that's the one where the group of people who were involved plan some more, and then plan some more, and never actually execute. That did happen in Eastern Massachusetts, and that organization was around for a good 7 years and never published one story. So, just do it. I mentioned earlier inn.org, there's another group, Lion Publishers, which is not just for nonprofits. Lion Publishers has a fantastic startup toolkit that is available to non-members. They also have an aspiring publication membership, very inexpensive. And just so you're aware, the American Journalism Project right now is offering up to $400,000 to start up organizations. It's a grant application, who knows how many they're picking. But that closes in February 15, but there's nothing to say there won't be one next year. Next, don't be afraid to ask for money. Deep down, people know it takes money to run an independent news organization. 3, get people on your email list for your free newsletter, because if you're in their inbox and you have value to them, they are going to donate when you use that same list to ask them for money. And lastly, let prospective board members know that they need to be involved. Unless you start out with lots of funding and plenty of paid staff, the board is going to be your core of your operation, and you're going to be asking them to do a lot the first few years. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Whoops. Thank you. Good advice all around. Just do it. Sounds so easy. So our final speaker is Virginia Dinty McIntyre, a board member from the Concord Bridge. The Concord Bridge launched its first edition in October 2022, so they're the babies of the group, and delivers newspapers weekly to 9,000 residences and businesses in Concord. Their content is also available on the website. Dinty focuses on fundraising and not-for-profit governance for the Concord Bridge.
Hi, it's Dinny McIntyre. That's okay, it's a ridiculous nickname, but I've had it all my life, and anybody who calls me Virginia, I figure I don't know them very well. So I think this is a great, we are the baby in this room. I want to introduce our editor-in-chief, Jen Pelusi, who's in the front row. Without her, we wouldn't be any place, but we worked very hard before Jen arrived. I'm one of 7 board members. We originally wanted to merge with the Mosquito because we share a high school, and thought, well, they're such a great newspaper, and don't you think they'd like to cover a couple of stories in Concord once a week, just a few? And the Mosquito very gently and nicely told us they would help us get going, but we had to do it by ourselves. That it was, the Mosquito really reflects the town. It really has a character. I've been subscribing since 2004 when I became a selectman in Concord, because it was the only way to find out what was going on in our local high school. They've had very good, extensive reporting about the high school. And tangentially, you can find out other things about Concord by reading the Mosquito, because we share a lot of common interests. But the Mosquito understood that that we had stories that we needed to tell, and it was going to be better to do it on our own. And so they gave us the heave-ho, I think, last February or something. We'd been, but shared their financials, shared war stories, shared very helpful information. And then the 7 of us, there were actually 6 active board members and 1 genial supporter who's just a lovely person, but he's got other fish to fry. But we looked at each other and said, okay, are we ready to do this? This is going to be a full-time operation getting this thing going. We had, let's see, 3 former selectmen, 1 retired editor, not editor, 1 retired director of the Concord Museum, a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, 2 lawyers, a young fellow. We're mostly got lots of gray hair, but Andrew Pedar, who's a global fintech executive. He's got, I think, 2 international startups that he's running, 1 in Australia and 1 in Ukraine. And he just, he's awake 24 hours a day, juggling things. But he sort of kept us on target. So we would have board meetings twice a week at the beginning as we were getting going, getting our financial model sort of squared away. And then once we had a basic idea of what the budget would be, we worked on fundraising plans and started fundraising in April. And I think, yes, just do it. But what we wanted to make sure is we could survive COVID, another COVID disaster, we could survive a recession, that we wanted to build the first 3 years of operation before we really started, before we had the confidence to sign a lease, to hire people. So we didn't just start. We said we've got to go find some money, and I've had a lot of fundraising experience, and other people on the board have too. So you're probably familiar with the pyramid. You don't want to go send a letter out to everybody who lives in Acton. You want to find who the big donors are to, say, the Discovery Museum, to the music, Littleton, whatever that music place is. Who are the deep pockets who support all interesting things that are going on in town? And you'll find those people, but talk to them before you put out a general appeal, because it's a lot easier to raise $700,000 gifts than it is to raise lots and lots of little gifts. That's just my advice. It worked for us. It's intense, and it requires figuring out who are the right people to do the asks. So, and I'd love to talk to people afterwards if you need some advice on this. It worked for us. We raised a little under $1 million, $970,000, and then we have pledges beyond that, so for when we need it. But that will pay our first 3 years of operations, or at least give us that cushion. So we're half supported by, our plan is to be half supported by donations and half supported by advertising. And as Penny said, it's a complete no-brainer for advertisers. If you tell them you're delivering to every household in Concord, they are very happy. What we did was we figured, in terms of figuring out what we'll charge for ads, we haven't figured out the digital model for doing advertising, but for the print advertising, we set a maximum of 40% of the paper as advertisements. So we figured out, okay, let's assume that our annual budget is going to be $450,000. How many column inches are there in a 16-page paper? And you do the division, and we came out with a column inch rate of $18, and it works. And it's much less than the Concord Journal charges for its non-existent newspaper, as far as I'm concerned. If you want to find out about house sales in Billerica, you read our Concord Journal. Or, it's the Gatehouse Gannett model now is to have regional reporting, and these are not local newspapers anymore. So it's a tragedy. So we hired Jen in August, end of August. We hired our news editor, Betsy Levinson, she's reported for the Journal for years and other organizations, so she knows Concord cold. So we hired her earlier in the summer, and then this nice young person who just does magic with her computer laying out the newspaper. So we've got a production manager, Jesselyn Frank, and an assistant news editor who was just hired a week and a half ago. What we're doing right now, you'll see. I mean, I'm so jealous of the Mosquito. It's got all these great reporters covering every board, covering, one of the arguments against merger that the Mosquito offered was Concord wouldn't want to read about septic inspections or in Carl, and I said, yes, we would. I mean, these are granular stories. This shows you how a town works. So we'll get there. We'll get the zoning board of appeals. We'll get the planning board. We'll cover all of that, but we're still growing. So advertising sales have been successful. I grew up in an advertising family, so I decided, well, other people were going to worry about the website and worry about board management and whatnot. I would sell the ad, so I printed out a little, or Jesselyn, our production person, printed out a little thing, and the first broker that I brought the brochure to said, okay, I want to sign up for a year's worth of full page every week for a year. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that for you, because we won't do more than 20 weeks in a row, because we want to make sure everybody has a chance to advertise. So the mission, the message is, this is a scarce commodity. So if you, I can't promise you that we'll have space for you, but just give me your name, and maybe we'll be able to accommodate you, and it's really worked. We've maxed out since our first publication, so that's been fun. So this is all about money, but what the newspaper is about is reconnecting Concord. And in the time I've lived in Concord since 1980, and the Journal, there used to be 3 newspapers in Concord. But the Journal was the only newspaper when I moved in, and it was great. I mean, it was the way you found out what was going on in town. That stopped. It started gradually diminishing about 15 years ago, and it's just dried up entirely. And you can see that in Civic Connection. We have very low attendance at our town meetings, very little turnout, very few contested elections, and it's just, and a lot of anger about the town. So I think the bridge is beginning. I mean, we're taking baby steps, but we're getting there, and I think we're really getting a sense that the town is moving in a good direction in terms of civic connection and involvement. We print all of the vacancies on town boards, and the boards are reporting that people are signing up. So that's good. Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all the speakers, and there'll be a little smush period while we move around, so if you want to catch up with any of them or exchange numbers or whatever, you'll have a chance to do that. So for those who are watching the recording for today, thanks for joining us. You can check the website of the League of Women Voters of Acton area for updates about today's workshop at www.lwv-actonarea.org.